Hi, this is Bev from Skibbereen Speakeasy. Delighted again to introduce three fantastic performers speaking into their phones to you for you to watch at home. First up will be the multi-talented visual artist and poet Angela Byrne, reading from her book Keepers of the Hill. Second will be Nick Smith from Clonakilty, who is not only a novelist and poet, but is especially known to people for his fantastic short stories, and he'll be reading Alto Stratus. And finally, in conversation and interview with our own Paul Castell, is Daniel Wade, not only an award-winning poet, but also an award-winning playwright. Based in Dublin, Daniel recorded this session with Paul over Skype, and we hope you enjoy them. We look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Angela Byrne. I'm delighted to have been asked to take part in the Speakeasy sessions, and thanks to Paul Kestel, and I hope you enjoy my poems. My first poem is set on Oni Island, but actually Oni Island isn't always an island. When the tide goes out, you can walk across the strand. So, the island's no longer inhabited, although there are holiday homes and land that the people who've come from the mainland use to graze their cattle on. I hope you enjoy it. I heard her before I saw her, the big brown cow. Her bellow scattered the seabirds. The tide had just opened, the strand emerging. She trundled down the boreen, keeping up a fast pace for all her size, heading out to Omi. Another bellow had got her halfway, cutting across the road markers on a diagonal path towards the graveyard, clinging to the coastal edge. Hadn't I seen her before, with a few cattle in tow, making a determined pace in the same direction? Was this a regular journey? Had she had a calf or two with her 1 year? Was her vocal urgency a seeking of those lost calves, taken from the island to their cow destiny? Did I feel an empathy or just a strange disconnect? How bright the sun shines, this clear west coast light, catching every slip of wave with a white iridescent flicker, blue below and turquoise at the edges. The collie was back. He was a go for a walk with anyone dog, waiting for the next family to play ball with, busied himself attempting to dig up something in shallow water. A cloud moving fast in a keen wind first darkens, then reveals a changing hue of yellow in a line across the sand. Bird Nation. Watching a sparrowhawk hovering, riding the keen east wind, intently focusing down on the land. This bird swoops, fast diving, claws stretched, prey taken, maneuver complete. 3 crows alight from a nearby tree, taking a leisurely circle, squawking congratulations, tipping heads in bird approval. On a distant rock 2 herons, joined them by another. They sit in conference. I walk out of the house. Above my head, sparrows spread out in great numbers, like lace on the wire. I hesitate, caught in a Hitchcock movie scenario with this bird nation. The Keepers of the Hill. For those who would gather at Tara, I put this moment here, this ancient palisade, resplendent in history, story, and myth, occupied, abandoned, and subject to colonialism. Looking to the north, the battlefields of territorial skirmishes, slain Ardee, Crossmaglen. Looking to the east, a distant coast, Skibbereen, Norl, Balbriggan. Looking to the south, the road to Viking Dublin, Dunsany, Mulhudder, Stony Batter. Looking to the west, remnants of a forest clings on in remaining woodlands, edging roads and copse, left to nestle around the sacred wells. Altrasna, Mullingar, Ishnacht. Watching distant horizons. Follow me up the hillside to walk on soft tufts of bog grass, jump piles of boulders strewn, left as the last ice receded, to contemplate lonely vistas, light ever changing, depending on time of day or season, the lakes below stretching to the Mam Turk in sometimes obscured distances, dry stone walls about here piled high, each side of the boreen, lest the wind blow you away, making a refuge for many plants, common and exotic, daisy, pansy, orchid, wild garlic, foxglove, gorse and heather, wild goats, hardy ponies and cattle, an occasional donkey, working dogs. The people speak an ancient language, talking being a local hobby, watching distant horizons. Staying too long. Staying too long in a space that beckoned with shiny examples, plucked out my eyebrows in disbelief, stole an aching heart, always a random thief. Left to her own devices, she shunted on, edges frayed, temper tamed. Splatter of rain, smudge of red on a woodland canvas. Were we all napping when the ecologist called that day, ran out, spluttering from toxic inhalation? Forgot to pack the dream catcher? Left to her own devices, she shunted on, edges frayed, temper tamed. This nostalgia, a big pile up of years passing, memories condensing, dribbling along a copper tube, yielding a crystal clear drop, a tantalizing moment, a pause before a dive into a cold sea. Left to her own devices, she shunted on, edges frayed, temper tamed. Old wounds. Met a Luddite on the road. She was off to join a band of miscreants, intent on keeping alive the spectre of popular uprising. Spring, she said, with no one there to correct her. The frost in the morning disagreed, leaving quickly as soft clouds lowered, obscuring horizons. Comfrey growing on the road, where I met the warrior, she who was looking for a plant to heal old wounds. Height of summer. Fearing an attack of domestication, she took to the woods. The wind in the birch trees unloosens a shimmer of chromium leaves. The ice princess of Altai, entombed in barbarian splendor, with indigo tattoos of deer, for 2.5 millennia. Height of summer, up Tara, between one day and another, low cloud obscures, no moon, wind like a plaintive cry ushering in calamity. But who is there to listen, take note, act on? A petrochemical post-scarcity Garden of Eden, ribbons and baubles bedeck the fairy tree, a lottery of wishes and hopes. And looking to the west, she takes flight.
Alto Stratus. I distinctly remember the first time that I flew. I was 3 years old. I know that for a fact because Daddy was taken away in the ambulance on my 3rd birthday. I thought that the white-coated doctors had been invited to my party. Daddy wasn't sick. He had locked himself in the upstairs bathroom. Whilst Mummy guided me to the kitchen, the doctors went upstairs. Above the music, I could hear my father shouting, and eventually he came down with them. He was crying. He told them he wanted to say goodbye to me. They led him into the kitchen, but somehow he slipped and knocked my birthday cake off the table. My friends stood in the corner and watched. As the doctors guided Daddy into the hallway, I ran upstairs and climbed onto the banister. As the front door opened, the sun shone through, and for a brief moment, Daddy was lit in gold. The front door closed, and Daddy was gone. Then Mummy saw where I was. "Toby!" she roared. "Get down from there this minute, you'll fall. It's your birthday and your friends are waiting." It was then that I began to fly, and rose effortlessly towards the ceiling. Mummy dashed up the stairs and caught hold of my ankle. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" she shouted. "I'm flying," I said. "Well, stop it. Come down at once." I wriggled and twisted and shook my ankle free, and she snatched at my trouser leg. It was no use. I floated out of her reach. It was as though I was a giant balloon filled with helium. I brushed against the ceiling and squeezed through the gap in the partly open skylight. As I bobbed away, Mummy's shouts grew fainter, and the clear, cool air washed over my face. There were all sorts of shapes that day. A castle with turrets like ice cream cones. A leering dog chasing a cat with a large hat, its mouth turning into a grin as it rushed past. A galleon drifted by with billowing white sails. I lay back in the great fluffy whiteness, my hands behind my head, and stared into the blissful blue beyond. Then I heard my mother's voice, rising gently towards me, growing louder, more urgent, each time she called my name. "Toby! Toby!" I sighed and reluctantly returned to our house. I eased myself through the skylight and landed on the banister. I slid down but lost my balance on the way. I tumbled off and landed on the hallway floor, the tiles cold against my cheek. My friends had all gathered around as Mummy shook my shoulders. She was crying. Then she was angry. "That was a silly thing to do. You could have broken your neck." "But Mummy," I said, "I flew. I really did." "No, Toby, you didn't. You fell, just the same as your poor Daddy. Now come on, get up. Let's have some of that cake, what's left of it." After that, I often sat at the top of the stairs, waiting for Daddy to come back, shining golden through the hallway door. Despite Mummy's promises, he never did, and I never again tried to fly. The clouds are now stratus, that solid grey, deflating sort of cloud. Shapeless, they conjure no enticement to become airborne. My body has become a slab of granite, weighing several metric tons. It pushes me through sheet, mattress springs and bed slats, and buckles the very pine floorboards that I laid 15 years ago. I require a trolley jack to prise me from this place of unflying. I am truly grounded, my balloon in tatters. I can still hear the voice of my mother. She rubbed her hands on her apron and smiled at me. "We can't fly, darling," she said gently. "That's only something the birds and butterflies can do." I didn't believe her. I was 3 years old. I'm still waiting for Daddy. Still waiting to fly. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. This first poem is called Bali CD Wood. And Bali CD is the site of a massacre during the Irish Civil War, wherein several IRA members were blown up by Free State troops. The epigraph is from Stiff Little Fingers, each dollar a bullet. Each old lie a bullet, each victim someone's son. And Irishmen kill Irishmen, as surely as if they fired the gun. More tourist-friendly now, aspiring even to tranquil anonymity, a nature trail serenaded by the leaves foaming whoosh. But a memorial cross says different. Time enough to pray, a final woodbine half smoked, blaze of a rifle snuffed in the dark. Bones hammered and paved far out of place, his good ear lent to silence, broken only by lorry brakes snarling out in the boreen before sliding back into Trelly's void. They're coming from the barracks yard to this camouflage of leaves, green as the Free State gabardine. Goodbye, lads, and God bless, he murmurs to the others, out of breath and nervy as they're chained to a felled log. Slivers of flesh or bone fly as the blast mangles the air like a stomach lining, turning stones loose, tossing warm limbs in the air, tangling them among leaf, loam and damp branch for crows to land and nibble. Not enough time to scream even. As for him, he falls much clearer, landing in a ditch across the way. He'll make his escape from here, but not yet. The heavy gun rattle singes with no ballads to magnify it. He was able for it all, but not for the limbs littering the hillside like logs, bark bled of rain, camouflage garbardine, lack of birdsong in the grove. Thanks, Paul. When I was going to go down to Skibbereen, there was going to be first time I was going to go down to Skibbereen, I was going to meet a friend of mine who since died. Paul Curran was his name, and Paul was a good friend of mine and a great poet from Dublin. And the last time I spoke to him before he died, it was a casual conversation. He just came into where I work and we were talking and said we were going to catch up and have a chat and maybe have a pint, because it turned out he lived in Skibbereen. And that same week I found out he killed himself. Found out via social media. It was a very sudden thing. And so when I was going to go down to Skibbereen for the speakeasy sessions, this was one of the poems I was hoping to read. It's in his honor. It's called Tattoos, in memory of Paul Curran. I saw you 3 times the week you killed yourself, but I spoke to you only the once. First time, you came into where I work. We had a brief catch-up, chatting about where we were since we last spoke, our girlfriends, the burdens of language, what gigs we both had lined up. None for me, and a fair few for you. Second time was in passing, and I didn't call out or catch your eye in time. Third time, smoking in the Dame Tavern doorway with your mates. And again, I said nothing, just kept on walking. Each time, there wasn't a bother on you. As proud Northsider and unsure Southsider, we cheerfully slag each other off, our liffey-edged polarities swirling in laughter, so you'd say, northbound or south, man, what's it really fucking matter? I can't say I knew you that well, Paul, but I did know you were sound. A skin decent enough to absorb indelible ink. No faded tattoos on show. At EP, over campfire embers, you planted your docks in the grass and your rebel bearing flared as you recited poems of Kulok, concrete sight of your youth, Agent Backroads, McGregor and Lamar, John Keats and Joy Division, mates lost the gunshots, and the art that never gets made. No one knew you were more fluent in the grammar of eulogy than any of us. So who knew it would settle on you, the abrupt beckoning of death? There isn't a lot to apologise for now, Paul. I've only your SoundCloud left on repeat now, and your voice's pulse, keeping me on the ball. Okay. Getting quite dark over here, so I'll try and do something. Trying to find something a bit more, a bit less dark. This one here is called Hush, and I lived in the States for a few months back in 2017. I lived in Boston for a while with my girlfriend, and it was a strange period in my life. It was very, very happy, but very, very new at the same time. And this poem came out of this. It's called Hush. And if we lived in the States, I'd use a police scanner to help myself sleep. The crackly feed of carjackings, drive-bys and robberies long in progress would rasp over the airwave from an LAPD radio straight into my earphones here in the New Hampshire guest room. Endowed with a flair for saving myself, I carry Endowed with a flair for saving myself, I carry exculpation, dreaming the hotly white blooms of gunfire are aimed at me. Lumps of soft-nosed iron poised to puncture my flesh, seething to sleep only when I know the perps aren't headed our way. Instead, we share a bed that confers no sleep and dusts our dreams with older dread. A blue-black moon blanching your eye as you clench my hand to yours, while I sigh darkly, chew on alarms nestling in the tangled brain. I get up at 12:07, careful not to let cold seep under the sheets. Try sleeping on the couch, wrapped in a heavy blanket. The image of your eyes' almond glimmer keeping me calm till daybreak. When you leave my room, your brow unhooked, and pull me back in under the covers for hush, for lazier love. We're talking earlier on about the sea, and I write an awful lot about the sea. And I was over in I heard about there was a death recently off the coast of Wexford of a skipper of a fishing boat, and I saw all the boats getting together, and they all blared their horns as a final tribute to him. This one's inspired by that. It's called Skipper. Just off the headland, a threnody of foghorns. Sonar scanned his corpse, anchored to the seafloor. The search was called off at dusk, crawling swells fit to burst, and too many prayers went adrift with the spray as a late westerly purred his name. All else held fast. Lighthouse glare, trawlers and lifeboats in his wake, a brotherly swarm, and his skipper's eye, trimmed for freak waves, as the divers sounded each fathom. Um, thing is, we can't be here in person, and we're doing this all in isolation. I wrote this poem around the start of when the lockdown was first put into effect. This is a villanelle, and it's called a self-quarantine. Unable to ignore the noise of my neighbours, spraying their hands with disinfectant and Castile, the world carries on behind closed doors. Taking it day by day with slow depletion of stores. I get all my news online, my weekly shop as well. Unable to ignore the news of my neighbours who stand far apart for the sake of each other's health. Fine by me. I don't much like people. The world carries on behind closed doors. I make the most of my self-imposed shelters, like a phoenix brushing off the last ash speckle, unable to ignore the noise of my neighbours, even with season 3 streamed, virtual tours of the Met and Guggenheim, earmarked for appraisal. The world carries on behind closed doors. Today the sun bubbles white, its molten glamour is lost on me, who caches dust like a pearl, as the world carries on behind closed doors, unable to ignore the noise of my neighbours. We'll do 2 more, if I'm able, and then I'll hand it back to Paul. See what ones I got here. Since it's Easter week, I wrote this one in read somewhere that a lot of former Irish Defence Force members are living homeless, usually when they finish service. Apparently they've been living in residential homes provided by state organisations for the last 12 years, about 700 of them in number. So this one's called Easter Week. Then he grabs his rifle, levels it, tries to ignore the screams. Butcher seeing a cadaverine sting his nose as tracer fire scorches the sky, a flock of bullets in slick flight. Today's ashes are being shipped home to Ireland, shrapnel and limbs, heli rotors whisking Congolese wind to gale force, sand drift salting his throat, leftover musk of battle. Now, bare knuckled in April, out in his arse and limping down the quays, he vomits shell casings over a stone wall, grains of flint lodged in his septuagenarian eye. Rain pounds like tarmac, like rubble. The Liffey's back on night patrol. Husks of acid pooling in splotches of green, white, orange. Lying huddled as he once lay huddled at a Lebanese gully stricken by roadside bombs, in the glare of a shop window display. The sleeping bag he takes cover in is a winding sheet. His mind the blueprints, blotched with the bidding of nations. Blood blends warmly with rain. He lurks across the way from the veterans' hostel in Smithfield, unable to bring himself to walk in. This is what he's come home to instead. Larium soaking his bloodstream, the moon's searchlight glimmer, his bones clinking taut layers of flesh as he refights his nightly battle with the cold, flashing through the cardboard mattress he salvaged from a wheelie bin, each shiver a jab from the finger of death to jolt him awake. A man of disappearances, named after Emmet or Wolfe Tone, or whoever was Taoiseach the year he was born. He now walks like he's being watched, like he's on holy ground, scorched coal black by grenade blasts, and not vast enough to harbour the dead. Let him and all else find their outpost, and see that it lasts. Okay, Paul, how's that?